question. How would we do this?
That's a really good question.
He did not connect to audio.
The musical art was, I guess, a tension between isolation and connection, which I think is kind of relevant to our current circumstances.
I'm gonna share my screen.
Oh, technology.
Whoa!
Concerns are too light for Hades. I spend a lot of my time thinking I'm worrying too much and a lot of my time thinking I'm worrying too little.
This project means a lot to me. I was craving for more, you know. I was intrigued to find out what happens.
Vandaag zou er eigenlijk een voorstelling zijn van Mephistopheles. Maar door corona kon dat niet doorgaan.
Faust Working Title is een voorstelling die in heel korte tijd is samengesteld. En met behulp van iedereen die er aan mee heeft gewerkt is eigenlijk de inhoud bepaald. Het is iets wat je kan zien zonder te begrijpen. Het is een collagevoorstelling en tegelijkertijd heeft het toch ook echt zijn eigen identiteit gekregen in de afgelopen 3 maanden. Het materiaal van de voorstelling bestond nog niet toen we begonnen met werken. Dus dat betekent dat je eerst een andere rol aanneemt dan die van regisseur of van dirigent of van decorontwerper. Namelijk in de eerste plaats de rol van maker. En het zorgt ervoor dat er hele spannende gesprekken plaatsvinden tussen iedereen in het team. Dus niet alleen Manoy en ik. En ik denk, omdat we onze rol blijven bevragen, dat het verhaal wat we vertellen niet maar van 1 persoon komt. En dat is voor ons heel belangrijk.
We wilden heel graag met deze voorstelling een heel breed scala aan muziek laten horen, omdat er heel veel verschillende lichamen op het podium aanwezig zijn. En we in de archieven van elk persoon zijn gaan graven. En in die archieven zit eigenlijk veel meer dan alleen muziek die met Faust heeft te maken. Dus we hebben stukken gekozen uit de Faust-operatische traditie, maar ook andere stukken uit de klassieke westerse muziek. Stukken die helemaal niet klassiek zijn en zelfs muziek die eigenlijk niet westers is. Omdat er best wel veel beperkingen op het project lagen, qua tijd en qua mogelijkheden, wilden we toch heel veel stemmen laten horen. En een fantastische manier om dat te doen bleek om aan componisten uit de hele wereld te vragen of zij wilden reageren op de muziek die wij hadden gekozen, door daar zelf een laag aan toe te voegen. Soms hebben we componisten gevraagd om heel dicht bij het origineel te blijven, maar daar een nieuwe wereld omheen te scheppen. En andere componisten hebben eigenlijk de muziek compleet uit elkaar getrokken en misschien wel niet meer echt in elkaar gezet. Je voelt denk ik aan alles dat het echt in 2020 is ontstaan. En het is echt een reactie op wat er in de wereld gaande is. En dat zie je niet allemaal letterlijk terug in de voorstelling, maar het is zo voelbaar dat dit gewoon niet al 4 jaar geleden of langer geleden had bedacht kunnen worden. Dat is iets wat het ook gewoon super intens en bijzonder gaat maken.
And so your life's been a success, and you have pleasure in excess. Don't worry, it will all end soon. The crack of doom is coming soon, and so your future's looking bright, and you've reached the giddy heights. Don't worry, 'twill soon end, it is all shallow and pretend. The crack of doom is coming soon. The crack of doom is coming soon. Ha! 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 Ha!
Contribute to the conversation. Remember to rename yourselves with your name and the company you work for, the town you're based in, so that we can recognize you easily and call upon you. Some people are still named with strange phones and numbers otherwise. We will be starting in a couple of minutes.
Sapete cosa potete fare? Tenere sempre i vostri due audio disattivati.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Good morning.
It's better, isn't it? Is he better?
That's right.
Too dark.
Too dark. Dagmar's in their top room in.
Sorry?
Dagmar's in their attic.
Yeah, right.
I stayed there in that room.
We are now also live on YouTube, if any of your colleagues would like to follow from afar. And welcome to everyone following us on YouTube as well. We have a few people still joining.
Try YouTube, it might mess up your thing there.
You can follow it on YouTube, if right?
Can I without messing up your thing? I'm going to try.
I don't know.
But it might, if you fade away, you tell me.
I have no idea how it works.
And I suggest we get started. Nicholas, Barbara.
Let me just give you a little bit of an introduction into this, because I think the title of the session, which is The Evolution of Opera's Operating Model and the Social Parameters for Public Subsidy, is a bit of a mouthful. Over the recent years, I guess, our focus as Opera Europa members has been on earned income and on how we optimize contributed income from the private sector, so that we've perhaps sometimes forgotten a little bit that public subsidy still plays the major role in sustaining opera companies in much of Europe. The pandemic and its aftermath this year has made many opera companies realize how dependent they are on public subsidy and on the support of their state, their city, their regional authorities. And over the summer, we at Opera Europa have used a number of exercises to track its evolution, not big mapping exercises across the whole membership as we did a year or two ago, but smaller groups to try to find out interesting information. And the most recent one was conducted over the course of the last month or so, was particularly to look into not only the development of public subsidy, but the criteria or parameters surrounding the granting of it. And we did a quick exercise into 26 opera companies in 16 different countries in order to have a comprehensive view. And the first thing I want to do is to say big thank you to those companies who willingly and at a difficult time found time to answer our sometimes impertinent questions. The exercise was conducted by Dagmar Waltz, who joins us for the next presentation, from her base in Paris, although she joins us from Düsseldorf, showing how wonderfully international her consultancy life is. And what she will now do is make a short presentation about the findings, at the end of which there will be some questions, and I want to draw some conclusions that might then lead to a lively discussion with some of you based in Como. So now over to Dagmar.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I'm afraid I only heard half of your introduction, but I'm sure it was splendid. Audrey, are you actually going to share your screen for this? We said you were going to do that.
No, I thought you were showing it from your screen. You have the presentation. If you
okay, fine. Sorry about that, everybody. Right, as Nicholas mentioned, about a month ago, we asked 30 opera houses in 16 countries all across Europe to tell us about their subsidy, and 26 of them responded. We asked how important subsidy is to their income model and what criteria and conditions their public funders apply in deciding grant levels and monitoring the outcome of the public investment in opera and ballet. The companies that responded come really from all over Europe, from France to Ukraine, Finland to Spain, and Scotland to Sicily. And like Nicholas, I would like to thank all of them for their generosity in sharing this information. The organizations vary enormously in size, with turnovers between 6.5 million and 270 million euros in 2019. In absolute terms, their subsidies range from 4.7 million to 95 million euros, and as a share of total income from 21% to 88%. The funding authorities involved operate at local, regional, and national government levels. So the houses might receive grants from, say, the city where they are based, or a regional government in Germany or in Austria, that might be the Bundesland, or very commonly a national ministry of culture. Actually, in most cases, the organizations receive subsidies from more than one of these, which of course creates extra layers of accountability. And there are slight variations between the funders in terms of their requirements. And local authority would be more interested in the immediate impact on their catchment area than a national funder would be. Very occasionally, there are intermediate funding bodies that distribute the money at arm's length on behalf of the government. Looking at the respondents, we found that they can be broadly divided into 3 groups. The first one is by far the largest, with 18 companies represented. And they are characterized by high subsidy levels, share of total income. Examples here come from Czechia, Prague and Brno, Poland, Poznan, 4 German houses, Stockholm and Palermo, amongst others. These are public institutions with strong links to their respective administration, and that's regardless of their own legal statute. Their funding might come from any of the government levels, depending on each country's hierarchy, or indeed a combination. The Teatro Massimo in Palermo, for example, receives funding from the Italian Ministry of Culture, the Sicilian Department for Tourism, Sports and the Performing Arts, and the municipality of Palermo. It's only in the cases of some of the national organizations that there is just one public funder. For example, with the Latvian and Lithuanian national companies. These organizations reported mainly quantitative performance indicators, although of course some qualitative factors also play a role, especially when it comes to the quality of the artistic offer, as we shall see. They tend to have less onerous reporting requirements and conditions to fulfill as a result of this focus on quantitative data. Another characteristic is that employment plays an important role, which we will come back to. The second group comprises 6 companies with subsidy shares of total income between 44 and 65%. And here we find companies from France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands, and naturally, they operate a more balanced economic model. They have a higher requirement of earned income. As with the first group, all government levels are represented individually or combined, depending on each country. Their funders tend to apply quantitative and qualitative measures in their decision-making and in their monitoring. But the terms and reporting requirements vary between the organizations. The third group has only 2 members, the Royal Opera House London and the Teatro Real in Madrid, with 21 and 26% of total income share, respectively. These are obviously strong international brands with large commercial operations and high private funding. Their main government funding is national. Like Group 2, they have to fulfill a mix of quantitative and qualitative conditions, and the absolute subsidy figure being so high, so is the level of their accountability. In other words, they have to work pretty hard to demonstrate the value of their investment. Looking at the parameters then, again, we found kind of 3 categories. The first one is purely quantitative, and the second and third ones are both qualitative in different ways. In the quantitative category, we find straightforward counts, indicators such as the number of performances, the number of revivals, new productions, and then there is the cover of a particular geographic area and touring. Financial performance is measured through earned income targets, set minimum ratios of subsidy to earned income, year-on-year increases of earned income, balanced budgets. We have occupancy rates, either physical or financial capacity, ticket prices, and also pricing policies. And these tend to be indicators that are derived from the company's own business plans. In the second category, we have qualitative criteria that relate directly to the organization's artistic remit. And we find indicators such as artistic quality expressed through a range of measures such as excellence, innovation, cutting-edge production, international standards, and craftsmanship. Then there is the question of whether you offer a broad range and overview of the art form, or whether there is a focus on your national heritage, for example, as is the case in Prague. An example of a broad overview would be Amsterdam. To what extent does your company contribute to the development of opera and ballet? Through commissioning new work, through programs to support emerging talent, young singers programs, young directors, innovative production or communication methods, and as we saw yesterday, digital being a very important factor here. And then there is the quality of your governance, management, and planning that is also taken into account. The third category is also qualitative, but relates to wider social impact and the civic role of the organization. This is really where the sustainability theme comes in. But I have to say there were remarkably few reports of related criteria, particularly given that we know there is a lot of work being done in these areas already, as we heard yesterday. There are the most common ones, probably the requirements to develop the widest possible audience, to have learning programs and activities to engage communities and particular stakeholders. But these were only cited by just over half of the respondents. And it wasn't entirely clear always whether they were requirements or whether this was just an indication of the range of activities that particular organization offered. Diversity, equality, inclusion, and representation, as Idia Gan said yesterday, on, behind, and beyond the stage is also very important, but again, not cited very often as a criterion. The same goes for the green agenda, which only a handful of organizations mentioned. And then there are general corporate social responsibility criteria that are sometimes linked to compliance with national legislation, and the question to what extent your organization may serve as an example of good practice to others wishing to develop their practices, procedures, and activities. As I said, employment is a key factor for many organizations, and 17 of the organizations cited it. In some cases, funders directly employ staff or determine their wages and salaries. Staff contracts may be equivalent to civil service contracts. And this demonstrates again the close link between the organization on the one hand and the public administration on the other. This can be seen in the responses, for example, from Czechia, Germany, and Switzerland. And of course, this has a huge bearing on the discussion and negotiation with the funding authorities. Typical employment indicators are establishment figures by operational area, numbers of freelance and guest contracts, sometimes with the actual numbers or limits set by the funding authority. Other measures include personnel costs expressed as a percentage of total cost, or the volume of social security contributions generated. Then we have levels of management pay, gender parity in the overall workforce and in senior management, and very occasionally employee satisfaction. Oh, sorry. That was really it for the fact-finding side of the exercise. And the question is now, where do we go from here? And for that discussion,
do you want me to jump in here, Dagmar?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Can you
yes,
leave it up? Can you leave the screen up?
I need to. Oh, I see. Okay. Yep.
Because this is the question. Now, I only want to summarize in a very brief way because I want to hear just the last slide, please. I want to hear from our panelists who conveniently represent Italy and Ukraine and United Kingdom, among others. But I just want to say a few things in introduction to that, apart from saying thank you very much, Dagmar. What is very interesting in this is that most assessments are being done on a quantitative basis. If you think of the current year, all opera companies are going to fail them because productivity has plummeted. And so by rights, most opera companies should have their grants severely reduced. Now, in fact, governments are more benign than that. They understand the situation that the companies are in and have, in the main, sustained grants to cope with the crisis. But looking ahead, the quantitative measurement is going to be difficult to justify for many companies. We hope there will be more performances in 2021, but there are unlikely to be as many performances as in 2019, and so on. So I think those conditions will be very difficult to attain. It is a fairly gradual process that funders look to the other areas. Of the 26 examples we had, I would say that the Dutch National Opera and Ballet's funding agreement was the most comprehensive in understanding that measurement needed to be qualitative as well as quantitative. And in a way was an example of good practice. We need to ask ourselves, what are the measures we would like, the criteria we would like to see operated? And before you all jump up and down in horror of more scrutiny by public bodies, I think we should say it is better that we take part in this process than that we have it imposed upon us. One of our panelists is Galyna Grygorenko from Kiev, who has been a performer, a producer herself, but who now works for the Ministry of Culture in Ukraine, and is therefore looking at it from both sides. In Italy, both Maria Meo and Barbara Minghetti have been very conscious that there needs to be some kind of social dividend from the work of their companies. And Graham Vick, who is currently in Italy, but who represents Birmingham Opera Company, is a particular example of someone who has driven a social agenda through his opera company. So it will be very interesting for me, and I hope for some of the rest of you, if the 3 or 4 of you contribute to this debate about what kind of criteria would be useful in the future to sustain our opera companies, and what should we, and in particular Opera Europa, do about to try to drive that. Over to Como.
Hello to everybody. Sorry for the problem at the beginning. We had some problem with the line. I'm here with Vick because we are producing Zaide in this very strange moment. But I am very involved in the team of this morning because I really feel that the theater could be the place for the new humanism that we need. So I will have after a little speech in the next table, and now I'm very happy to listen about this research that was very important because we need also to speak about investment, management, and the relation with all the field of the theater. And so I'm very happy to listen first from Vick, that is here with me. And for me is the father of this vision of opera for everybody and democratic opera. So I leave Vick the word.
Me already?
Yes.
Hello everybody. Listen, I'm a bit shocked actually at how little the word audience has appeared in all those criteria. Who the hell do we do this work for? I ask myself. Surely not for ourselves. We exist, as we have realized to our grief this year, we exist for the audience. We only happen when we're heard and witnessed. So any criteria about the value of a company must begin with its audience. Who are they? Who are we speaking to? Do we know who we're speaking to? Do we take them into account? Is that the audience that we should have, given the amount of public subsidy that we receive? Is it possible for the audience we want to come to our performances? Are we successfully, artistically communicating with that broad audience? I mean, what has COVID taught us this year? That the world is even worse in terms of division and inequality than we had feared. That we've been burying our heads in the sand, that all the figures are worse in areas of social deprivation, class and race. So we've got to wake up, I think. We've got to pick ourselves up and say, not how do we achieve what Nicholas found rather uncomfortably called social dividend, but social impact, communication. How can we be part of the whole of society? Because otherwise we're just existing for ourselves and a privileged few. And that can't be right in any way at all. So my criteria, what are they? They are about whether the audience represents the whole of the community in which the company exists. Global is already devalued, I think. We already re-understood the value of local, of community, of the place we live, work, and make art. I think we've already moved away from that glossy, globalized world where all major theatres share the same work. I think that's gone, happily. But COVID has given us the local, hasn't it? I mean, we're going to try and get on less planes. We're going to try and make the work with and about the people in the places we are much more, is what I think will happen. And in doing that, we've got to lead, as Nicholas says, on how we're going to be evaluated, on whether what we represent on our stages, in our choruses, in the orchestra bit, is truly representative of the emerging new Europe. And let's be absolutely frank, it's going in one direction only, and we need to embrace that. And indeed, we need to embrace it and welcome the richness of experience and culture that all of the new arrivals and the development in Europe can bring us. We need to find a way of welcoming all of those people into our audience and into our performances. In Birmingham, we have for 20 years been developing criteria before we were required to by the funding bodies. Though many of the things we've developed have become requirements that the Arts Council asks us to do. Of course, inclusion is the top. Inclusion in audience, inclusion in performers, inclusion in orchestra. And our way of attaching that has been to look at the way we perform opera, not in terms of a fixed existing model, but to break open the way we perform the canon. In other words, we put at the heart of performance participants, volunteers from our city and community who not only themselves are part of the work's creation, development, and voice, but are themselves a direct conduit to the audience, who consequently are also participants in the performance. That's pretty much the way that we go. This has not led to any compromise in artistic standards. It has led to some parallel excellence, I might call it, really. Excellence is a relative term, I think, and it's about how well you're achieving your aims. Which is why I feel that any kind of evaluation artistically has to be based on how successfully it's communicating its intention and who to. That's where we need to look at the measures. It's where we need to challenge ourselves. And somehow, and I better say the big elephant in the room and the nightmare for everybody listening, and myself included, is the only way we can achieve what I'm talking about is by having lower ticket prices. Peter Brook, the great genius director, once invited to a conference on the future of opera, stood up when his turn came and said, "There is no future for opera without lower ticket prices." And then he sat down again. That was his entire contribution. It's not what anyone wants to hear when we're all short of money, when we don't know why we believe. But quite honestly, if that's why we do the work, that's the reason for our existence. If the prime reason for existence is to contribute to the economy, there are a lot more effective ways to do that. Maybe it's useful to use the argument sometimes with politicians, but it isn't why we exist. We don't exist to create employment. We exist to make art. We exist to communicate, to join people together, to increase the empathy that binds society together, to speak to the widest possible range of human experience simultaneously, which is the thing that we miss via digitally, of course, is that I stand next to somebody who has their own experience while I'm having mine. The joy of a performance is that everybody's experience is individual but simultaneous and shared. That's the magic of a live performance. It's its profundity. I'm going to stop for a little bit now. There's one last thing I should say, I think. I mean, we have gone in this direction in Birmingham, not, as I say, because it was led by a management idea, not because it was led by stakeholders, not because it was led by subsidy, but actually it's the result of an artistic vision. What I really believe is that change and growth needs to be led by artists, and artists need to step up and need to embrace this new challenge that we have. They need to lead the work in that direction. And that, of course, I'm bound to say this, that the job of management and indeed of stakeholders and the government is to support and enable that vision so it goes in a healthy direction which has the agreement of all concerned. You can't dictate artistic process and vision. I think that's where it has to begin. Okay.
Thank you very much. I think it was very clear and important what Graham said. First, that this project had to be art of high quality, because sometimes when we speak about children or social project, everybody is thinking about less money and less investment and not so high quality. So I think it's really important. And second, also this idea that we need artists to make the change of probably also of the world, but for sure about our theater. And now I think we can listen the project and how they work from Galyna Grygorenko. I pass the word in Europe.
Thanks a lot. Hello to everyone from Kiev. As Nicholas said, I was on both sides of the opera production, because I was a producer of independent opera company. And since the beginning of 2020, I joined the team of Ministry of Culture in Ukraine. And now I am responsible actually not only for the theaters, but also for music sector, libraries, and some kind of exhibitions, etc., etc. So my responsibilities are to provide transparent process of public allocation to opera sector as well. And of course, our Ukrainian system of opera theaters are much inherited from the Soviet Union, and much of public funds were allocated to the, I would say, to the process, not to the results. We have only 3 quantitative indicators which influence the volume of public funds which are allocated to each theater. That is number of performances, the number of tickets sold, and the ratio of earned income in comparison to the total income of the theaters. Obviously, we have inherited the vast the level of state support is approximately to 90%, which is allowed by the law, and actual volume is around 80%, 80-85%, which granted from the national government to 3 to 4 big opera theaters in Ukraine. I would say that, of course, we do understand that opera theaters exist for people, for the audience. That is a place for social dialogue. That is a place for social cohesion. That's a place for people to have their probably hope for the better future, especially in these hard times of pandemic restrictions and all that. We have seen in the spring of 2020 the hardest budget sequester, budget cuts in Ukraine, which was like 40% of the budget of the Ministry of Culture. As always, economists and financial ministers, they think that people in lockdown can do without art because they are sitting home, so they do not need to go to theaters, to cinemas, to libraries. So let's cut this expenditure. That's the easiest way to have economize. Yeah. In the summer, we have new Minister of Culture who actually promotes the new kind of understanding what culture does actually to society, especially in these hard times. And his few steps in reforming the attitude to public funds which are allocated to culture is to change the minds of the people who are responsible for public funding, because they should understand that the culture and opera theaters as well are not just entertainment. That's the place where people could express themselves. That's a place where people could interact, where actually the society builds itself. In the end of 2019, we were planning to reform the system of budget allocation to opera theaters in Ukraine, and we plan to introduce a lot of new criteria to decide which theaters should gain the more money. But obviously, during this year, we have revisited and rethink all of these demands which we could apply to these theaters, because we understand
that we couldn't just apply the same conditions as, for example, for any enterprise which produce some goods for everyday life. So we should think about future, because if we do not support theaters now, we could end up without theaters at all next year. So we should support, despite the fact that they were closed for half a year. We should allocate public funds enough to support these people who still are working in these theaters. So we decided to postpone this radical reforms in public funding in theaters, but at the same time we are introducing some new kinds of other ways of support. For example, starting from the next year, we will diminish the VAT tax for cultural goods. It would be 7% instead of 20%. And we are thinking about introducing some kind of helpful supervisory boards. It's called supervisory board, but actually it will be the boards which will help the theaters to stay resilient, to plan their strategic activities for the 5 or 10 years ahead. And we are attracting people from business, from different spheres of IT, etc., which usually do not interfere with opera theaters previously. But they do understand now that they should give their kind of social investment to this kind of cultural activity, and they would like to join these supervisory boards to help theaters to survive the crisis and to develop in future. So my answer to what criteria should be implied to public funding is, of course, first of all, the number of audience attract, because as Graham said, it's really important to give people the possibility to be engaged with this product, to give people the possibility to express themselves also. And probably another one important aspect is to build inclusive audience and to build audience development programs in our theaters. So we will stimulate them to be more interactive with their audience, because before they just often they exist just for the sake of art. So they perform on the stage, and no matter who is sitting in their hall, they are doing their job, and that's all. And now we try to make it more more human-oriented, more audience-oriented, but I should say that will be probably next 2, 3, or even 4 years ahead, because nowadays we cannot, in these restricted times, to demand from them a lot of innovation, because they just cannot do this at the moment. Probably I will pass my word to Anna Maria, or?
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. We go to Parma, where the theater is working a lot about this thematic. So Anna Maria Meo.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are working very much on this, issues and important aspect of our work. And I have to say that before all, we participate to the research that Opera Europa has coordinated. And of course, one of the main issues is how to transfer this new needs to the public to the public decisors, those who make the decision about parameters through which we are asked to present our project that then should be funded. This is very, very important, because otherwise there is a big distance between what we would like to do and what we are pushed to do to get public funding. And in our case, public funding is not the majority, because we get from public subsidies no more than 48%, but it is still very important, because we would not be able to do our activity without such a big percentage of resources. So now let me see how I can share my screen. I know how to do it, because yes, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So what we have done, as you may know, our one of the main events our theater organizes is Festival Verdi. We have a season activity during winter, and then we organize every fall an international festival dedicated to Giuseppe Verdi, who was born just around Parma.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Anna, can I stop you? Sorry. This relation is for the second table.
Yeah, so, but now I was, yeah.
Ah, sorry. No, I don't want to interrupt you, but now
no. I'm
we're
aware.
speaking about the research and about the need, and then in the second table we have our speech. Sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I was aware of this. Don't worry. Thank you anyway. So we get public funding from Minister of Culture and another association called the Reggio Parma Festival. But we also get money from the region Emilia-Romagna and from the municipality of Parma and the Chamber of Commerce. The parameters are let me say, quantitative parameters are very important, because we are asked to give exact number of social security, of employment, of number of performances, number of new production, and also, production that we repropose. But of course, it is also we are also asked to demonstrate the high artistic quality, the international distinctive offer and vision excellence, the innovation, and also new commission and new works that we commission to contemporary musicians. Another important issue that we are asked to realize is a cooperation with national and international theaters, and so there is a kind of mix of parameters, but there is no a real request about social dividend to be distributed to our community. This is a project that we do, and we will talk later about it, but is almost our decision, because as far in the parameters that we are asked to, the requirements we are asked to consider, do not include this kind of issues. So it would be very, very important through, and Opera Europa can play, I believe, a big role if we would be able to convince our political, the people who decides properly, that this kind of parameters must be inserted and must have a weight. Because otherwise we will never be able to avoid the pressure on numbers and high, let me say another thing. What does it mean high quality artistic programmation? Does it mean to involve stars? Does it mean to, give back economical dividends through the star system? I guess that the excellence must be evaluated also on what we give back from the social point of view to our territories. But until we do not get there, theaters and those who programs the activity will be always too shy in having this as a central purpose of our activities.
Thank you very much. I think this last point is very important because we needed to have the recognition of this kind of project. And I don't know, Nicholas, if you wanted to ask if there is some question, if someone wants to say something more.
Well, first of all, Barbara, I would like to thank all of you, Graham, Galyna, Anna, and you, for your interesting insights and observations on this topic. Opera Europa will pursue it if you and the other members want us to. My warning to all of you is this. At the moment, I think our sector is very under-regulated. That may have been very comfortable and convenient for you, but I suspect that more regulation is coming as hard-pressed governments and other public bodies fighting for money, as in Ukraine, threaten to reduce amounts, and that if you want the support, you need to accept that there will be conditions attached to it. And my major point arising out of this study really is this. If it's going to happen, you ought to be part of creating the criteria. Not in a selfish way at all, but you need to be part of the thinking that dictates how it should be done. And I think what Anna says about Parma is very interesting, that at the moment, the parameters are old parameters. They involve international recognition, numbers of people, and how many people employed, and all those things. As Graham says, opera doesn't exist in order to employ people. We're not that kind of social service. We need to have a different purpose, and I think we need to be part of the system which creates it. Now, that will be different in Italy. It's marvelous that Galyna has a hand in it in Ukraine, where they're still, if I may say so, overshadowed by the old Soviet system, and are still trying to forge a new one. It's very interesting that, in effect, in Birmingham, that Birmingham Opera Company and Graham created their own targets to have to hit, and now the government is saying, "Oh, these are quite good targets. We'd like to apply them to you." That actually is a very good model. Now, I don't want to go on with recommendations now, because we're about to move into one of our wonderful breakout rooms, and Audrey will explain again how you may jump to one of our national hubs, because we are going to divide as a conference between Como, thank you very much, Helsinki and Madrid, and where there will be different panels and teams talking about the question and maybe taking it in different directions. And then after an hour of that, we come back together for a report session at which it would be nice to pull together some conclusions. And from the point of view of Opera Europa, me and my team, it will be very nice for to be given instructions about where to take this next in a way which will be beneficial not only to the opera companies, but also to the communities in which we live.
Okay, and now off to your breakout rooms. Today is a bit different from yesterday. You are being sent relatively randomly to one of the 3 rooms. If you have updated your Zoom system, you are free to change rooms yourself, to switch rooms. And if you'd like to go to one particular room and you're not able to do that on yourself, simply write to me and I'll be able to move you around. Okay, so here goes. You're going to get your invitation to break out to a new room.